Inside Pelican Bay Prison, world's deadliest inmates and gang secrets exposed. The fog at the edge of California. Think you've heard every prison story? Think again. Hit subscribe now, because what you're about to discover inside Pelican Bay will change everything you thought you knew about America's deadliest inmates. The morning air off the Northern California coast tasted like salt and iron. Fog drifted over Crescent City in low, rolling sheets, swallowing the pine trees and the narrow two-lane road that led to Pelican Bay State Prison. It was barely dawn, but a convoy of dark SUVs and unmarked vans was already snaking toward the razor-wire perimeter. Inside the lead vehicle sat Special Agent Marcus Hall of the FBI's Sacramento field office, his fingers drumming against a manila file marked Operation Black Widow, Confidential. Months of wiretaps, coded letters, and whispered informant tips had led to this morning. If the intelligence was right, they were about to witness proof that Pelican Bay's most feared gang leaders were orchestrating violence across California from inside windowless cells. The prison itself rose out of the mist like a fortress from another century. High concrete walls, gun towers jutting like shark fins, and the gleam of electrified fences. It was built to be escape-proof, communication-proof, humanity-proof. Locals called it the Alcatraz of the Redwoods. Since opening in 1989, it had become home to men other prisons couldn't control. Mexican Mafia shot callers, Aryan Brotherhood enforcers, contract killers, and serial predators like Roy Norris of the Toolbox Killers. Even Charles Manson had spent time in its security housing unit, the SHU, a sealed block of windowless cells where inmates lived in near total isolation for 22 to 24 hours a day. Hall had studied those cells on grainy surveillance tapes. Stark concrete, stainless steel toilets, bolted doors with narrow food slots. Prison officials called it security. Former inmates called it living burial. Yet despite the isolation, gangs still managed to transmit orders. The FBI had intercepted instructions for hits, drug drops, and extortion rackets, all traced back to Pelican Bay. This morning's operation was supposed to deliver irrefutable proof. As the convoy rolled through the first gate, Hall's phone buzzed. It was Agent Maria de Leon, embedded inside the prison under the guise of a legal aid. Her voice was low and tight. They know something's up. Movement in C-Pod. Two high-ranking Nuestra Familia guys just demanded a legal call. Hall's stomach tightened. Legal mail was the one channel prison officials couldn't easily monitor. It was how coded messages, or kites, often slipped past the walls. By 6:15 a.m., the SUVs had parked inside a secure sally port. Fog clung to the razor wire like dirty cotton. Hall and his team hustled toward the SHU control room, boots echoing off concrete. A correctional sergeant with a weathered face met them at the door. "We've got them locked down," he said, but his eyes flicked nervously toward the monitors. On one screen, two gang leaders sat cross-legged on their bunks, whispering to each other through the vent system. On another, a mailroom clerk held a stack of envelopes with legal stamps, the kind the FBI believed carried coded orders for hits outside. Hall pressed his badge against the glass. "Bag every piece of outgoing mail now," he ordered. "Nobody leaves the SHU without my say-so." But then the alarms began. A shrill, rising wail flooded the control room. Red lights pulsed overhead. On the monitors, doors clanged open in a section that should have been sealed. Inmates were spilling into the corridor, faces covered with makeshift masks. One held a sharpened piece of metal. Another pounded his fists against the camera, cracking the lens. Hall's radio erupted with static and a panicked voice. "We've got a breach, C-Pod. They're moving." For a moment, everything slowed. Hall saw his own reflection in the monitor, the thin line between law enforcement and chaos. He'd come to Pelican Bay to expose how gang power seeped out of these cells. Now it seemed the gangs were making their move inside the prison itself. Somewhere beyond the fog-shrouded walls, a van was waiting for instructions that might never come. And inside the SHU, a secret older than Pelican Bay itself was about to surface. Messages in the vent. The scream of alarms ricocheted through the concrete corridors like a hurricane trapped in a tunnel. Red strobes painted every surface of the security housing unit, turning the gray walls into a pulsing blood-red haze. Correctional officers scrambled for riot shields while radios crackled with garbled orders. Somewhere above the din a voice kept shouting, "C-pod breach. Lock it down." Special Agent Marcus Hall pressed himself against the control room glass, eyes darting from monitor to monitor. In the fogged-over images he could make out masked inmates moving like phantoms, 5, maybe 6 of them, fanning out in a coordinated pattern that looked less like a riot and more like a military maneuver. This wasn't random chaos. It was choreography. "Who opened those doors?" Hall barked at the sergeant beside him. "They weren't supposed to open," the sergeant muttered, punching codes into a dead keypad. "System says they're still locked." On one grainy camera feed, Hall caught a glimpse of an envelope fluttering from a guard's hand as he retreated down the hall. The distinctive blue stripe of legal mail. The very mail they'd come to seize. Someone inside had known the FBI was coming, and moved first. Agent Maria de Leon's voice came over the radio, breathless and clipped. "Hall, it's de Leon. They've built a comms network through the vent. They're passing messages cell to cell like a telegraph. I can hear them. Names, locations. They're orchestrating this in real time." Hall's pulse hammered. For years, investigators had speculated that gang shot callers in the SHU used the vent system to talk. Inmates called it the wall phone. But no one had ever caught them in the act. Now, in the middle of a live breach, the truth was screaming through the ducts. Through a jagged hole in the monitor's cracked glass, Hall saw one of the masked inmates slide a folded paper under a cell door. Another picked it up and stuffed it into a sock. The sock was tossed to a third man who tucked it inside his waistband before disappearing into a shower stall. Seconds later, a different inmate emerged from a neighboring cell, as if nothing had happened. It was like watching a sleight-of-hand routine with razor-sharp stakes. De Leon whispered again over the radio, "They're talking about a hit on the outside, tonight, some warehouse in San Jose. They keep saying Black Widow closes its legs. Do you copy?" Hall's mind flashed back to the manila file marked Operation Black Widow. If these messages were real, the Nuestra Familia leadership had learned about the FBI sting and were trying to shut down witnesses or evidence before agents could act. The prison walls weren't just leaking power, they were amplifying it. A crash jolted him from the thought. One of the control room doors shook under a heavy blow. A muffled voice from the other side snarled something in Spanish, then thumped again. The sergeant drew his pepper spray. Hall reached for his badge, though he knew it was useless as a shield. "Backup en route?" Hall demanded. "Local TAC teams 15 minutes out," came the reply. 15 minutes in Pelican Bay's SHU was a lifetime. In that time, coded letters could vanish, informants could die, and an operation years in the making could unravel into blood and paper ashes. Hall scanned the bank of monitors one last time. In one corner, an older inmate with tattoos creeping up his neck sat perfectly still on his bunk, staring at the camera. He lifted a single finger to his lips, a quiet shushing motion, then pointed straight at Hall through the lens. The gesture sent a chill up the agent's spine. Whoever that man was, he knew the FBI was watching. He wanted Hall to see him. Then the feed cut to static. "Who is cell 209? Hall asked. The sergeant's fingers flew over a keyboard. Names Rafael Ghost Ortega. High-ranking Nuestra Familia, rumored to be the new communications chief. No confirmed photo, just sketches. Hall's gut clenched. The Ghost had been a whisper on wiretaps for months, an unconfirmed architect of the gang's code system. If Ortega was inside and calling shots in real time, this was the chance to catch him, or to lose everything. From somewhere deeper in the SHU, A metallic clang echoed like a bell. De Leon's voice rose urgently in his earpiece. "Marcus, they're opening a second corridor. Something big is moving. I think they're trying to smuggle a hard drive or phone. If it gets out, Black Widow's blown." Hall looked at the sergeant, then at the sealed door rattling under repeated blows. He had a choice. Stay in the safety of the control room and watch the operation implode on a screen, or step into the SHU's red-lit corridors and try to intercept the ghost himself before the evidence disappeared. He took a breath, shoved the door's panic bar, and felt the heavy steel swing outward into the hallway. The sound of alarms grew louder, a living thing wrapping around him. For a heartbeat he thought he saw a shadow slip around the corner, tall, tattooed, a glint of something metallic in hand. Then the lights flickered once, twice, and went out. The ghost in the red corridor. The hallway swallowed Marcus Hall whole. With the power out, the strobes had died, leaving only the eerie glow of emergency exit signs and the flicker of flashlights bobbing in the distance. The air smelled of sweat, disinfectant, and something metallic, blood or fear, he couldn't tell which. The SHU had gone from a fortress to a labyrinth, and somewhere inside it a man called Ghost was moving like a phantom. Hall's boots splashed through shallow puddles of mop water. Every sound echoed, a door slamming somewhere far off, the hiss of someone breathing through cloth, a faint whisper that might have been a voice or the vent system itself. For the first time since entering Pelican Bay, Hall felt the prison as the inmates did, endless concrete, no horizon, no sky, only the hum of unseen watchers. He clicked on his flashlight. Its beam cut a thin cone through the darkness. On the walls, gang symbols painted in toothpaste and hair dye glistened like runes. Arrows pointed in directions no guard had ever understood. He passed a door where an eye stared back at him through the food slot, unblinking. A low voice drifted out, "Too late, Fed." He turned a corner and froze. 3 masked inmates stood at the end of the corridor, blocking the path like sentries. One held a sharpened piece of metal, another cradled a bundle wrapped in a t-shirt. Hall raised his badge instinctively, though it felt absurd in the gloom. "FBI," he said, voice steady. "Drop it." The one in the middle tilted his head. "You're already inside, man," he murmured. "Bad place to be." Before Hall could reply, a door behind the trio clanged open and a taller figure stepped out, tattoos climbing his neck, a spiderweb across his jaw. Even in the half-light, Hall recognized him from the sketch. Rafael Ghost Ortega. The architect of the vent network. The silent nerve center of Nuestra Familia's operations. Ghost didn't speak. He simply raised a finger to his lips, the same gesture he'd made at the camera, then tapped the t-shirt bundle in his subordinate's arms. Something rectangular jutted inside, too smooth to be paper, too solid to be clothing. A phone? A flash drive? Evidence of everything they'd built behind bars? Hall's radio crackled with De Leon's voice, faint through static. "Marcus, you need to back up, can't find you." Ghost heading for Service Corridor B leads to kitchen loading dock. The 3 masked inmates shifted, closing ranks. Ghost stepped backward through another door, still holding Hall's gaze. A hiss of air and the door sealed behind him. Hall lunged forward. The nearest inmate swung the shank. Hall ducked, grabbing the man's wrist, slamming him into the wall. The second man tried to block him, but Hall drove a shoulder through, adrenaline surging. The bundle tumbled from the third inmate's arms and skidded across the floor. Hall dove, fingers brushing fabric, and felt cold plastic inside. A sudden hiss from above. The vent grill popped loose. A thin cord dropped down, hook at the end. The bundle jerked upward as if pulled by invisible hands, vanishing into the duct before Hall could grab it. He watched, stunned, as the cord reeled back up and disappeared. "They've got runners in the ceiling," he shouted into his radio. "Evidence gone up the vent." The 3 inmates melted back into their cells, leaving Hall kneeling on the concrete. A faint draft whispered through the duct overhead. In it, he could hear fragments of code, numbers, street names, a date. Tonight, San Jose widow closes. A heavy hand clamped his shoulder. Hall spun, ready to strike, but it was Agent De Leon, sweat beading her forehead. "We've lost the hard drive," she said, breathless. "But we've got a bigger problem. There's a tunnel from Service Corridor B to the old kitchen dock. Ghost is heading there right now with something else. If he makes it, everything goes dark." Hall wiped grime from his face. "Then we cut him off," he said. De Leon's eyes flicked to the vent grill. "He's not just moving evidence. He's moving orders. We think there's an outside pickup scheduled, a guard on the take. If they get that drive out, every witness you've lined up for Black Widow is dead by morning." A siren wailed again in the distance. Hall thought of the van waiting beyond the fog, of names whispered through the duct, of coded letters slipping past legal mail checks. Pelican Bay was supposed to be escape-proof. Instead, it was a spiderweb, and Ghost sat at its center. He tightened his grip on his flashlight. "Then we go into the web," he muttered. De Leon hesitated. "There's one more thing," she said. "We intercepted a note before the power cut. It's got your name on it." Hall unfolded the scrap she handed him. In neat block letters it read, "Marcus, you're next." The emergency lights flickered. Somewhere ahead, a metal door slammed shut. Ghost had left a message, and a trap. The service corridor. Marcus Hall and Maria De Leon moved quickly, their footsteps muffled by the damp concrete floor. The emergency lights threw dim pools of red every 20 feet, leaving stretches of total darkness between them like pockets of a cave. The note with Hall's name on it crumpled in his fist. He could still feel the blocky handwriting pressing into his palm like a threat carved in stone. They reached the heavy steel door to Service Corridor B, a maintenance passage rarely used except to move food and laundry carts from the kitchen dock to the SHU. De Leon swiped her access card. Nothing. The reader's green light blinked once, then died. "Power's still cut," she whispered. Hall tried the handle. Locked. He stepped back, drew in a slow breath, then rammed his shoulder into it. The frame groaned but held. He remembered the sketch of Pelican Bay's layout he'd studied the night before. The corridor ran under the SHU and connected to a loading dock once used to bring in kitchen supplies. If Ghost was heading there with a guard on the take, it was the perfect handoff point. Hidden from cameras, outside normal guard rotations, and now cloaked by the power outage. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small pry bar, one of the few concessions the prison had allowed his team to bring in. 2 hard yanks and the door latch gave way with a squeal of torn metal. They slipped inside. The corridor beyond was narrow, lined with exposed pipes sweating condensation. Water dripped steadily into puddles on the floor. The walls were tagged with faded gang signs. NF-14, a black handprint. Somewhere ahead, footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate. Hall clicked off his flashlight and listened. A metallic scrape, then a low murmur in Spanish. Ghost wasn't alone. They moved silently, hugging the wall. As their eyes adjusted, they saw 2 silhouettes at the far end. A man in correctional officer khakis holding a duffel bag, and beside him a taller figure with tattoos glinting in the emergency light. Ghost. The officer handed Ghost something that caught the glow, a thick USB stick sealed in plastic. Ghost tucked it into his waistband and zipped the duffel shut. De Leon mouthed, "We need proof." She raised her phone to snap a photo, but at that instant the officer turned, sensing movement. His hand went to his belt where his radio should have been. Instead he pulled a key ring, spun it, and unlocked the dock door behind him. Ghost spoke for the first time, his voice low but clear enough to carry. "Tell Marcus Hall we're already out there. He's chasing a shadow." Then he pushed through the door. The officer hesitated, then followed. Hall lunged forward. "FBI. Stop." The corridor exploded with motion. The officer dropped the duffel and drew a collapsible baton. De Leon kicked it from his hand. Ghost's shadow vanished through the dock door, but the guard swung wildly at Hall, catching his shoulder. Hall slammed the man into the wall. The duffel burst open, spilling envelopes stamped "legal mail" across the wet floor. Inside one, Hall glimpsed a folded sheet of paper, a map with multiple city names circled: San Jose, Salinas, Stockton. A network. The guard gasped. "You don't know what you're in. He's everywhere. Even here." Hall cuffed him with a zip tie from his belt. "Who's on the outside?" he demanded. "Who's waiting at the dock?" The man's eyes darted to the ceiling pipes. "You'll never make it out," he whispered. "Ghost already knows your moves." De Leon grabbed Hall's arm. "We can't stay," she said urgently. "If Ghost gets past the dock door, he's in the kitchen yard. There's a van on the perimeter for trash pickup. He could be gone." Hall stuffed the USB stick and the map into his pocket, then sprinted toward the dock door. As he reached for the handle, he heard the faint whine of an engine on the other side. A truck reversing, its backup alarm muffled by the thick metal. He yanked the door open and was hit by a gust of cold, foggy air. The loading dock stretched out like a stage. Dumpsters lined up, a chain-link gate beyond, and a white panel van idling with its brake lights glowing red. A man in coveralls stood at the back, holding the vent cord that snaked down from a ceiling grate like a fishing line. At its end dangled a plastic-wrapped bundle. Ghost stood halfway down the dock, hood up, one hand on the bundle, the other holding a small radio to his mouth. Even from this distance, Hall could see the faint smile. "Marcus Hall," Ghost called softly. "You're late." Hall stepped onto the dock, heart hammering. "You're not leaving with that drive," he said. Ghost tilted his head. "It's already gone." And then Hall heard it, a faint thump overhead. Another cord retracting into the duct. Another bundle gone. De Leon burst onto the dock behind him. "They're moving everything through the vents," she shouted. "There's a whole system above the ceiling. We've only seen the tip." Ghost dropped the cord and stepped back toward the van. "Pelican Bay was built to bury us," he said. "We turned it into a tunnel." He disappeared into the fog. Fog and steel. The white van's brake lights glowed like twin red eyes in the mist. Marcus Hall sprinted across the loading dock, boots slipping on the damp metal grating. Maria de Leon was right behind him, shouting into her radio for backup, but only static answered. The fog rolling off the Pacific wrapped everything in a muffled hush, as if the prison itself wanted to swallow the sound. Ghost reached the back of the van and swung the doors open. Inside were two large trash bins lined with black plastic. He heaved one of the vent bundles inside and slammed the lid. A driver in a ball cap sat at the wheel, face shadowed. Hall glimpsed a correctional officer's uniform shirt under the coat, another insider. "FBI!" Hall yelled. "Step away from the vehicle." Ghost turned, and for a moment Hall saw him clearly. Spiderweb tattoos shimmering with moisture, eyes calm and almost amused. "You think you're chasing me," Ghost said quietly, "but you're chasing a signal. We've already sent it." He snapped his fingers. The driver threw the van into gear. Tires squealed against wet concrete. De Leon lunged for the door handle, but Ghost slammed it shut, spinning her away. Hall grabbed the edge of the van as it lurched forward, hauling himself half inside. He caught a glimpse of dozens of vent cords coiled like snakes on the floor, a mobile hub. Each cord ended in a sealed envelope or flash drive. Everything Operation Black Widow had tracked for months, packed into a rolling trash run. Ghost swung a length of chain at him. Hall ducked. The chain clanged against the doorframe. He tried to pull himself further into the van, but the driver swerved hard, throwing him against the metal wall. Ghost's voice stayed low, almost conversational. "We built this from nothing," he murmured. "A network right under your nose. And tonight we bury it, and you." De Leon jumped, grabbing Hall's arm. yanking him back out just as the van shot toward the chain-link gate. She stumbled, pulling him with her, and they both hit the dock as the van smashed through the gate and disappeared into the fog beyond the perimeter. Alarms erupted from the watchtowers, but the searchlights were still dead from the power cut. All Hall could see were the twin red eyes shrinking into the mist. He lay on the cold metal, lungs burning, trying to process what he'd seen. The cords, the bundles, the hard drives, the corrupt driver. Everything they'd built their case on had just rolled out of Pelican Bay's back door disguised as garbage. DeLeon pressed her earpiece, listening. "They're gone," she whispered. "Highway Patrol can't see them in the fog. And listen to this. San Jose warehouse just went dark. Our witness protection team can't raise the informant." Hall sat up. "They're going to clean house," he said. "Every witness we lined up for Black Widow." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the USB stick and the map he'd snatched from the corridor. It was damp but intact. City names circled, dates scribbled, arrows drawn between them like a spiderweb. In the corner, a small symbol, a spider with a red hourglass on its back. DeLeon stared. "They call this Black Widow," she said slowly. "But whose operation is this? The FBI's sting or theirs?" Hall closed his hand over the stick. "We're not just up against a gang," he said. "We're up against a system built inside the prison, with guards, lawyers, mail rooms, a whole hidden infrastructure. And Ghost is at the center." A gust of wind lifted the fog enough for Hall to see the SHU's looming walls again, the razor wire glistening like wet fangs. He felt, for the first time, that Pelican Bay wasn't a prison at all. It was a machine, and it was still running. He stood, pocketing the map. "We're not done," he said. "We've got his symbol. We've got a date. We still have a chance." From somewhere inside the SHU, a low rumble echoed. Not alarms this time, but a collective chant rising from the cells. Words he couldn't make out, but a rhythm like a drum, like a warning. DeLeon's face went pale. "They're signaling," she whispered, "to someone on the outside." Hall looked at the dark highway where the van had vanished. The chant grew louder, echoing through the vents and pipes. It wasn't random. It was a code. "They're counting down," he realized. And then the prison lights flickered once more and went completely dark. Countdown. The lights died again, and for a heartbeat Pelican Bay became a black box. No hum of fluorescence, no camera clicks, just the low, rhythmic chant rolling through the vent. It rose from hundreds of cells at once, the sound of boots pounding concrete, fists on steel, voices braiding into a single, coded pulse. Marcus Hall felt the hairs on his arms lift. This was no random noise. It was communication. A message built into rhythm. DeLeon pulled a small penlight from her pocket, its thin beam cutting a shaky cone through the dark. "Listen to it," she whispered. "Short, short, long, short, short, long," she counted on her fingers. "It's a countdown. I used to do gang cases in San Quentin. They do this before a coordinated action." Hall leaned closer to a vent grill. The pulse reverberated up through the metal like a drum skin. In between beats he caught fragments of words. Tres, dos, Spanish numbers. Then a pause, then uno. He grabbed his radio. Still dead. He tried DeLeon's phone. No signal. "They're jamming us," he said. "They're about to light this place up." Far down the corridor, a door clanged open. A glow of flashlights bobbed, correctional response team finally arriving. But Hall's gut clenched. "Too slow," he muttered. He pulled the damp map from his pocket. The circled cities, the arrows, each date matched a shipment or a hit tied to Nuestra Familia. The next arrow pointed to tonight, a warehouse in San Jose. The map wasn't just evidence, it was a playbook, and Ghost had just removed the last hard drive linking him to it. Without it, Black Widow collapsed. DeLeon crouched beside him. "We can still stop it," she said. "If we decode the chant, maybe we can figure out what's about to happen here before it starts." Hall nodded. Short, long, he scribbled marks on the back of the map. It looked like Morse, but not quite. More like a prison yard signal they'd seen on old wiretap transcript. He traced the pattern, connecting the dots until a single number emerged. 209. He stared. Cell 209. Ghost cell, he said. He's not leaving. He's drawing us back in. A crash shook the wall behind them. The chant stopped abruptly. A voice echoed from a vent, deep and calm. You're out of time, Marcus. Hall spun toward the sound. The penlight caught a streak of red paint on the floor, an arrow pointing back toward the SHU. He's leading us somewhere, Hall said. A trap or a meet? DeLeon gripped his arm. If it's a trap, we don't have a choice, Hall said. If we wait, whatever he's planned in San Jose goes off and witnesses die. They moved back through the service corridor, past the cuffed guard still slumped against the wall, eyes wide with terror. He tried to speak but only managed a rasped warning. He's already inside your team, Hall's stomach dropped. What do you mean? But the guard just shook his head, lips moving silently as if reciting a prayer. They reached the SHU again. The emergency lights flickered back on, casting the halls in a sickly red glow. At the far end, cell 209's door hung open. Inside, the bunk was neatly made, a single envelope on the pillow. Hall stepped inside slowly, scanning for wires, trip triggers, anything. He picked up the envelope. It was blank except for his name. He opened it. Inside was a Polaroid, tonight's date scrawled at the bottom, and a photo of a woman in an FBI windbreaker tied to a chair in a dim room. Hall's chest clenched. The face was familiar, one of his protected witnesses from San Jose. Above the photo in block letters, she talks, she dies. You decide. Behind him, DeLeon's phone buzzed once. No signal, just a notification that flickered and died. On the screen, for a fraction of a second, Hall saw a spiderweb icon. He turned the Polaroid over. 3 words were scrawled there. Come alone. Tunnel. A hiss of air came from the vent overhead. The chant started again, slower now, a new rhythm. A signal not to inmates but to him. DeLeon touched his shoulder. Marcus, she whispered. He's baiting you. Hall stared at the photo. He's giving me a path, he said. If I follow it, I might save her. Or walk into something I can't walk out of. The chant swelled, echoing through the SHU like a heartbeat. The tunnel below. The chant in the vents slowed to a heavy, deliberate thud, like a heart beating under the floor. Each strike vibrated through the concrete and up Hall's legs. The Polaroid trembled in his hand. He had seen coded threats before, but this was different. This was a map. Come alone. Tunnel. Ghost wasn't just baiting him, he was guiding him somewhere. DeLeon moved closer, voice low. If you go down there without backup, you're finished. He knows these passageways better than we ever will. Hall's eyes flicked to the vent overhead. He wants me down there, he said. That's where the real network is, the part we haven't touched. If I don't go, that witness dies tonight. She touched his arm. Then we plan it. We track you, send the team after. He shook his head. He'll smell backup. He's built this entire operation on spotting patterns. If he says come alone, he'll know if I don't. For a moment they stood in the red-lit cell, the chant thrumming around them. Hall saw the woman's face again in the Polaroid, terrified, gagged, a date scrawled at the bottom. The spiderweb symbol in the corner of the map seemed to pulse like a living thing. He took a deep breath and stuffed the photo inside his jacket. I'm going, he said. DeLeon gritted her teeth. Then I'm your shadow. He won't see me. You'll have eyes above ground. Hall nodded once. Stay on comms if you can. If I don't come out, pull every alarm you've got. They left cell 209 and followed the arrows painted in toothpaste along the corridor floor. Faint marks nobody but an inmate would notice. They led to an old maintenance hatch at the far end of the SHU. Hall knelt, lifted the grate, and peered into darkness. A ladder descended into a narrow shaft lined with cables. A rush of damp air smelled of salt and oil. Far below, faint light flickered. He swung a leg over the edge and started down. The shaft was claustrophobic, walls slick with condensation. His flashlight beam bounced off rivets and rusted pipe. Each step of the ladder groaned under his weight. Above him, De Leon's silhouette lingered at the hatch, one hand to her earpiece. At the bottom, Hall stepped into a low tunnel barely wide enough to stand upright. Pipes ran along one wall, dripping. A series of old maintenance lights flickered at intervals, casting long shadows. It felt less like a passageway and more like a forgotten artery of the prison, pulsing with secrets. He moved forward, boots splashing in shallow water. The chant was louder here, transmitted directly through the pipes. It wasn't just sound, it was vibration. He realized the inmates weren't shouting randomly, they were striking the pipes with a pattern that carried messages underground, bypassing every microphone. Ahead, the tunnel widened into a small chamber lit by a single bulb swinging on a wire. In the center stood a folding table with 3 objects laid out: a burner phone, a stack of legal envelopes, and a black spider tattoo stencil. On the far wall, a vent grill had been pried open, revealing a crawl space disappearing into darkness. A voice drifted from the crawl space, calm, steady, inches from a whisper. "Welcome, Marcus." Hall's flashlight caught movement. A figure crouched just inside the crawl space, face shadowed but tattoos unmistakable. "Ghost." "You built quite a web," Hall said quietly. Ghost smiled faintly. "Pelican Bay built the walls. We just learned to talk through them." Hall took a step closer. "Where is she?" "The woman in the photo." Ghost tilted his head. "Safe for now. Whether she stays that way depends on you." "Why me?" Hall demanded. "Why this game?" Ghost slid something across the floor, a flash drive identical to the one Hall had grabbed earlier. "Because you're the only one who listened," he said. "You think you're here to shut us down. Maybe you're here to see what you built." Hall frowned. "What are you talking about?" Ghost's eyes glinted in the half-light. "You call it Operation Black Widow. But you didn't start it. We did. We fed you the names, the hits, the cities. You've been our delivery system." Hall's stomach tightened. "That's impossible." Ghost leaned closer. "Is it? Look at your map. Every raid, every arrest, it cleared our rivals. You thought you were dismantling a network. You were pruning it for us." A chill ran down Hall's spine. All those years, all those sealed indictments, and Nuestra Familia's power had only grown more centralized. Had the FBI's sting become the gang's own tool? Ghost tapped the flash drive with a tattooed finger. "This is the last piece. The blueprint of the new web. You want her back? Take it. But once you do, there's no going back." Hall reached slowly, fingers brushing the cold plastic. Ghost's voice dropped to a whisper. "Welcome to the Widow's Center." The Widow's Center. The tunnel seemed to breathe around Marcus Hall, damp air rushing through the open vent, the distant pulse of pipes carrying code from unseen hands. Ghost crouched in the crawl space, the glow of the single bulb carving hollows in his tattooed face. The flash drive sat between them like a live explosive. Hall crouched slowly, knees aching from the damp. "If you've been feeding us cases," he said, "if Black Widow was your move all along, why bring me down here? Why show me this?" Ghost's faint smile never wavered. "Because you've been chasing a shadow," he said. "And shadows can be weapons. We've spent years sending you our rivals. But now we're at a crossroads. Someone inside wants to burn it all down, the gangs, the guards, the pipeline. She's the one you're protecting in San Jose." Hall's throat tightened. "You kidnapped her." "We rescued her from your own people," Ghost replied. "Ask yourself why the guard on the dock knew your name." Ask yourself who signed off on your witness protection. You think this drive is evidence. It's a ledger, names of everyone on both sides taking a cut. Hall felt the damp map crumple in his pocket. He thought of the Polaroid, the spiderweb logo flickering on De Leon's phone. Could Ghost be bluffing? Or had the operation really been turned inside out? Ghost slid the flash drive a little closer. "Take it," he said softly. "See for yourself. But once you open it, you're in our world. No badge, no bureau, no backup. Only truth." Hall hesitated. The drive's cold plastic pressed into his fingertip. Above them, the pipes vibrated again, a new pattern, slower, heavier. De Leon's voice crackled faintly in his earpiece at last, just a whisper through static. "Marcus, get out, it's a trap." Ghost cocked his head. "Your partner's listening, isn't she?" he murmured. "She's closer than you think." Hall's pulse hammered. "What did you do to her?" Ghost raised his hands slowly. "Nothing. Yet." From the far end of the tunnel, a metal grate screeched open. Light spilled in, blinding after the dimness. Silhouetted in the glow was De Leon, but her hands were empty, no radio, no gun. Her face was pale. "Marcus," she called. "You don't understand. He's telling the truth." Hall's stomach dropped. Maria stepped back. But she stepped forward instead, into the chamber, eyes locked on Ghost. "This isn't just a gang," she said. "It's a network built on both sides of the fence. If you take that drive, you'll see it. You'll see my name too." Ghost's smile widened just enough to show teeth. "Every spider needs a web," he said. "And every web needs a builder." Hall's hand tightened on the flash drive. The pipes above them began to tremble harder, the chant rising again like a storm building underground. For the first time he realized it wasn't a countdown, it was a signal. Something was moving beneath their feet. He looked at De Leon, then at Ghost. "What's about to happen?" Ghost leaned back into the crawlspace. "You're standing on it," he whispered. "The tunnel isn't a path. It's a fuse." A deep, low rumble shook the walls. Dust sifted from the ceiling. In the distance, a siren wailed once and cut off. The map in Hall's pocket crinkled like a warning. De Leon's voice trembled. "Marcus, if we don't stop it now, it's not just San Jose. It's everywhere." The bulb above them swung wildly, shadows stretching like spider legs across the wet concrete. Hall closed his eyes for a heartbeat. He'd come to Pelican Bay to expose a gang. Now he was holding the ignition to something far bigger, and standing between a woman he thought he could trust and a man who might be both criminal and whistleblower. The pipes boomed again, louder, as if the whole prison were breathing. The fuse. The tremor under Marcus Hall's boots deepened into a steady vibration, rattling the pipes like drumstick. Drops of water fell from the ceiling in time with the chant. He felt it in his teeth, not just noise but pressure. The tunnel was alive. Ghost stayed crouched, calm, as if he were in a chapel. De Leon stood a few feet away, her hands raised slightly, eyes locked on Hall. "He's telling the truth," she said again, voice breaking. "Everything you thought you knew about Black Widow, it's been compromised from the inside. They're going to bury the evidence and everyone tied to it." Hall gripped the flash drive tighter. "If that's true, then what's under us?" Ghost's voice was low, almost reverent. "Not a bomb. A bypass. A line built years ago when the prison was expanded. We turned it into a pipeline, messages, contraband, people. Tonight it becomes a dead man's switch. If they take me, everything leaks. Every name, every location, every payoff. All at once." Hall's pulse hammered. "You're going to dump it?" Ghost nodded. "Straight into the open internet. Court files, mail scans, guard rosters, bank accounts. Everyone goes down, gangs, guards, agents, judges. No one walks away clean." De Leon took a step closer. "If he triggers it now, San Jose is gone. The witness, the safe houses, all compromised. We have to cut the pipeline before it dumps. Hall stared at her. You knew about this? I tried to stop it, she said, eyes shining. When I realized the bureau was being used, I went under. Ghost pulled me in. It was the only way to protect the witness. The pipes thundered again, a deep rolling boom. Dust sifted down. Hall flicked his light along the tunnel wall and saw a panel of wires bolted to a junction box. Old, corroded, but still live. A small red LED blinked in rhythm with the chant. That's the trigger, Ghost said softly. Disconnect it and you stop the dump. But the witness dies. Leave it and she lives, but everyone else burns. Hall's mind reeled. He had come to Pelican Bay to shut down a gang. Now he was holding the last piece of a network that reached from solitary cells to City Street. And the two people in front of him, one a legendary gang strategist, the other his own partner, were asking him to choose who to save. De Leon's voice dropped to a whisper. Marcus, look at me. If you pull that wire, they kill her. But if you don't, you're complicit in everything. Ghost's eyes gleamed. Welcome to Pelican Bay. The chant rose one last time, a deafening roll through the pipe. The LED on the junction box began flashing faster, like a countdown. Hall's breath came fast. He reached toward the wires, fingers trembling. Tell me where she is, he demanded. Ghost's smile vanished. Cut the red lead, he said. It buys you 1 minute. Hall's hand hovered over the panel. Red and black wires twisted like veins. He could feel both of them watching him, Ghost poised in the crawl space, De Leon standing in the half-light, the prison's heartbeat hammering through the floor. He took a deep breath and reached for the wire. Fallout. The tunnel above Marcus Hall's head had gone silent, but not dead. The vibration of the pipes had changed pitch, from a rhythmic chant to a low, steady hum like electricity in a power line. The LED on the junction box now glowed a dull amber. He could taste copper on his tongue. The countdown had been stopped, but the system was still alive. De Leon's voice came ragged in his earpiece. San Jose confirms the witness extraction. She's safe for now. But Marcus, Pelican Bay's on lockdown. They're blaming you for the breach. Hall pressed his palm against the damp concrete, feeling the hum. He had severed Ghost's trigger, but he hadn't shut the network down. He'd only made it angry. He stood, pocketing the flash drive. We're leaving the tunnel, he said. I need to see the witness myself. They climbed the ladder back into the SHU. The air was thick with pepper spray and sweat. Riot teams lined the corridor, shields up, barking orders. Inmates sat against walls with their hands laced behind their heads, eyes glinting with quiet defiance. As Hall and De Leon pushed through, conversations died mid-sentence, replaced by knowing smirks. News of what had happened below had already traveled through the pipe. At the Sally Port, a lieutenant blocked their way, jaw clenched. Orders from Sacramento, he said. You're not leaving until we debrief. Hall showed his badge. You can debrief me later. Right now I'm taking a protected witness out of a kill zone. The lieutenant's eyes flicked to De Leon. Then she stays. She's under internal review. Hall felt his pulse jump. She's my partner. Not anymore, the lieutenant said. 2 uniformed guards stepped forward. De Leon raised her hands slowly. It's okay, she said. Marcus, go. I'll find you. Hall hesitated. He saw the flash of something in her eyes, fear or warning, then turned and walked out. The gate clanged shut behind him. Fog rolled across the yard like a living thing. Outside the prison, a bureau sedan waited. He slid into the back seat. The driver, a young agent he didn't recognize, handed him a phone. Direct to San Jose field office, he said. Hall dialed. A woman's voice answered. This is Agent Price. We've secured the witness. She's shaken but alive. Hall exhaled. I need to speak to her. She's at a safe location, Price said. We're moving her again tonight. Orders came from D.C. Hall frowned. I didn't authorize that. Silence. Then, very softly, neither did we. The line went dead. Hall stared at the phone. Outside, fog swallowed the highway, the prison receding into a gray mass of concrete and wire. He was supposed to feel relief. Instead, he felt the web tightening. The flash drive in his pocket felt heavier than a weapon. He looked at the young agent driving. Take me to Crescent City Airstrip, he said. I'm going to San Jose. The agent glanced at him in the mirror. Sir, you're not cleared to. Hall cut him off. Do it. As the car pulled onto the coastal road, Hall caught a final glimpse of Pelican Bay through the mist. In one of the guard towers, a lone figure stood silhouetted against the dawn. Even at this distance, he thought he saw a tattoo glint under the light. Ghost. Safe house. The safe house on the edge of San Jose was a plain stucco bungalow with a tired palm tree in the yard and a white van parked half a block down. From the street, it looked like any other rental in the neighborhood. Inside, though, the air was heavy with the smell of stale coffee and tension. Sofia Alvarez, the key witness Hall had been protecting for months, sat on the edge of a couch, wrists still marked from the tape ghosts people had used when they snatched her. She kept glancing at the window where blinds trembled in the faint breeze. 2 FBI agents in windbreakers stood by the kitchen door, murmuring into radios. She didn't trust them. Not after what had happened at the first safe house. One of the agents looked up. We're moving you again tonight, he said. Orders from D.C. Sofia shook her head. That's what they said last time. Then they grabbed me. The agent's jaw tightened. This time's different. Outside, a car rolled slowly past. Its headlights cut thin lines across the blinds. Sofia flinched. She thought she saw a spiderweb sticker on the rear window, tiny black like a calling card. 200 miles north, Marcus Hall's sedan ate up the coastal highway. Fog still clung to the cliffs, surf crashing below. He hadn't spoken for an hour. The flash drive sat on the seat beside him like a sealed confession. He could plug it into his laptop right now and know the truth. The whole network, every name, but doing so would put him inside the web forever. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Marcus, a woman's voice said. Soft, calm. She's not safe. Hall gripped the wheel. Who is this? You met me once at the Capitol hearings. I was an attorney for the hunger strike plaintiff. You're sitting on a flash drive that will destroy more than gangs. It's not just Pelican Bay. It's every SHU in the state. If you want Sofia alive, don't take her to another bureau house. Bring her to me. Where? Hall demanded. Downtown San Jose. Old courthouse basement. Midnight. The line went dead. Hall stared at the phone. The young agent driving glanced at him. Sir. Nothing, Hall muttered. He slipped the phone into his pocket. Another spiderweb drawn in invisible ink. Back at the safe house, Sofia heard a soft tap on the window. 3 short, 2 long, like the pipes in Pelican Bay. She froze. The 2 agents in the kitchen didn't seem to hear it. Then a folded paper slid under the front door. She picked it up with shaking hands. In block letters it read, Hall is coming. Do not go with him. Her breath caught. She crumpled the note and shoved it into her pocket before the agents saw. Outside, the white van's brake lights glowed in the dusk. Hall's car rolled off the highway into San Jose as the sun set behind low cloud. He could feel the city's energy, warehouses, piers, the smell of diesel and salt. Somewhere out there, Ghost's web reached its final strand. He touched the flash drive once more. It was warm now, or maybe his hand was cold. Either way, the weight of it felt like a verdict waiting to be read. Ahead, the city lights flickered on one by one. Somewhere inside them, Sofia Alvarez waited, holding a note she shouldn't have seen, wondering if Marcus Hall was her savior or her executioner. Crossing lines. The streets of San Jose shimmered under a thin film of rain. Sodium lamps threw pale cones of light across shuttered warehouses, their windows painted black. Marcus Hall's sedan rolled past loading docks and chain-link fences topped with coils of razor wire, a miniature echo of Pelican Bay's perimeter. In his jacket pocket, the flash drive seemed to vibrate with every bump in the road, as if alive. He steered toward the address the Bureau had given him, a bland tract house on a quiet side street, the third safe location in as many weeks. As he turned the corner, his headlights swept across a white van parked a few houses down. Its windows were fogged from the inside. A spiderweb decal clung to the rear glass. Hall's pulse jumped. Ghost's calling card. He killed his lights and coasted to the curb. In the passenger seat, he spread the damp map across his knees. A new dot had been circled in red since he last looked, this very street. Someone inside his own network was feeding coordinates to the web. He reached for his phone. Dead battery. He glanced at the young agent driving. "What's your name again?" he asked. "Agent Carter," the man said without looking away from the windshield. Hall studied him. Clean cut, new badge, no field experience. "Stay in the car," Hall said. "If I'm not back in 10 minutes, drive to the field office." Carter frowned. "Sir, do it." Hall slipped out into the rain, jacket collar up, the flash drive tucked in an inner pocket. He moved up the walkway toward the house. The blinds were drawn. Inside, a faint blue glow pulsed, television or phone screen. He knocked once. Silence. Then Sofia Alvarez's voice from behind the door. "Marcus." "It's me," he said. "Open up." The door cracked. One of the bureau agents from earlier peered out, face expressionless. "We weren't expecting you this soon," he said flatly. Hall's gut tightened. He stepped across the threshold anyway. Sofia sat on the couch, eyes wide, fingers clenched in her lap. She gave the smallest shake of her head, a warning. Hall smiled as if nothing was wrong. "Long drive," he said. "We're moving you again tonight?" "That's right," the agent said. "Orders from D.C." Hall closed the door behind him and locked it. "Good," he said. "But let's make sure we're all on the same page first." He reached into his jacket, not for his weapon but for the folded note Sofia had slipped him at their first meeting months ago, a code phrase only the real protective detail would know. He spoke it quietly. "Night turns red." Sofia's eyes flickered with recognition. The agent's did not. Hall moved fast. He spun, slamming the man against the wall just as a second agent emerged from the kitchen with a suppressed pistol. Sofia ducked as Hall drew his own weapon and fired once into the ceiling. Plaster rained down. The false agent froze. Outside, the white van's engine roared to life. Hall grabbed Sofia's arm. "Move," he barked. They bolted through the back door into the rain-slick yard as the imposter agents scrambled behind them. A chain-link fence separated the yard from an alley. Hall boosted Sofia over and vaulted after her. Tires screeched out front. They landed in mud behind a row of trash cans. Sofia's breath came in gasps. "They told me you'd kill me if I ran," she whispered. "They said you were part of it." Hall shook his head. "They've been inside our detail from the start." A crash from the street. The white van whipped into the alley ahead, headlights flaring. Ghost wasn't in Pelican Bay anymore. He was here. Hall shoved Sofia behind a dumpster. The van rolled to a stop 10 feet away. The passenger door opened slowly. A tall figure stepped out, hood up, spiderweb tattoos glistening in the rain. "Ghost." He raised his hands, palms out. "Easy, Marcus," he said quietly. "You've got something of mine." Hall drew his weapon. "You're out of your cage." Ghost smiled faintly. "Was I ever in it?" He glanced at Sofia. "She's the only one who can prove what's on that drive. But you're running out of time." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Hall's grip tightened on the gun. Rain streamed down his face, mixing with sweat. "Then talk," he said. "Right now." Ghost shook his head. "Not here." He turned and walked back toward the van, hands still raised. "If you want to know who built the widow's web, follow me," he called. The van's rear doors swung open, revealing a dimly lit interior lined with computer equipment and vent cords like coiled snake. Sophia clutched Hall's arm. "Don't," she whispered. "It's a trap." Hall stared at the van, the rain, the faint glow of screens inside. Everything he had been chasing, the web, the evidence, the truth, was right there. He lowered his gun but didn't holster it. "Get in," Ghost said softly. "Or walk away and never know." Into the van. Rain drummed on the alley's corrugated roofs, running in silver streams down the brick walls. The white van idled, its exhaust curling like breath in the cold. Inside, blue screen light flickered across cables, vent cords, and sealed envelopes stacked like snakes' eggs. The smell of diesel and damp paper drifted out. Marcus Hall stood frozen, gun still raised, as Ghost waited at the open doors with his hands slightly out, palms up as if offering surrender. Sophia clutched Hall's arm, trembling. "Don't go in," she whispered. "He's playing you." Ghost's voice was low but carried over the rain. "You've been chasing the widow's web for months. Everything you need to know is in here. Or you can keep chasing shadows until somebody else dies." Sirens grew louder in the distance. Whoever was coming would find a firefight, not a confession. Hall holstered his weapon slowly. "Sophia stays here," he said. Ghost shook his head. "She comes too. She's the key. Without her, the drive is just numbers." Hall felt the flash drive heavy in his pocket. He looked into the van again. Rows of laptops, a satellite uplink dish bolted to the ceiling, bundles of legal mail, a corkboard covered with maps of California dotted with red pins. This was no ordinary gang safehouse. It was a mobile command center. He turned to Sophia. "If we stay, they kill us both," he murmured. "If we go, we might end it." Her eyes were wide but steady. "Then go," she whispered. Hall guided her into the van first, then climbed in after her, never taking his eyes off Ghost. The doors closed with a soft click, sealing them into the dim interior. The sirens faded as the driver eased the van forward, tires hissing on wet pavement. Inside, the hum of electronics filled the silence. Screens showed live feeds from prison corridors, vent diagrams, bank transactions scrolling like ticker tape. Hall realized with a chill that Ghost wasn't just operating from Pelican Bay. He'd been watching the bureau too. On one screen he saw himself and de Leon descending the maintenance ladder hours earlier. Ghost sat on a metal bench opposite him, calm as a man on a train. "Now you see it," he said quietly. "Pelican Bay is just the cocoon. This is the spider." Hall kept his hand near his weapon. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," Ghost said. "Somewhere you can finally choose." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a second flash drive, identical to the one in Hall's pocket. "One of these burns everything," he said. "The other clears you and your partner but leaves the web alive. Only one is real. Only you can decide which." Sophia whispered, "Why him? Why us?" Ghost's gaze flicked to her. "Because you've both been inside long enough to know the truth. And because no one outside will believe it unless it comes from you." The van turned sharply, plunging into a warehouse district where the streetlights flickered. Rain hammered the roof. Hall could feel the road's rhythm in his bones. He looked at the twin drives on the bench between them, two small black sticks holding either salvation or damnation. Ghost leaned forward. "You've got until we reach the pier," he said softly. "After that, the widow closes her legs for good." Hall stared at him, at Sophia, at the drives. The hum of electronics felt like the pipes under Pelican Bay, a coded heartbeat ticking toward zero. He realized he was no longer chasing Ghost. He was sitting in Ghost's web. Ghost stories. The van's interior glowed a cold blue from the screens bolted to its metal walls. Rain hammered the roof above, muffling the world outside. Marcus Hall sat opposite Ghost, one palm pressed against the seat to steady himself as the vehicle swayed through tight turns. Beside him, Sofia Alvarez kept her eyes on the floor, jaw clenched. Ghost rested his elbows on his knees, tattoos rising and falling with each breath. "You've been staring at me since you got in," he said softly. "Want to know how it started?" Hall kept his voice even. "Why don't you tell me?" Ghost glanced at one of the monitors. A grainy video looped of men striking pipes in Pelican Bay's SHU. "When they built the security housing unit, they thought they'd sealed us off. No mail, no phones, no voices. But we learned to talk through steel. Codes in taps, toothpaste arrows, legal mail. It was survival at first. Then it became power." He pointed at a second monitor showing a scanned court document. "Operation Black Widow wasn't the first time your people came for us. It was the first time we realized we could aim you." Hall's gut tightened. "You fed us targets." Ghost nodded. "We gave you our rivals. You called it law enforcement. We called it pruning." Sophia looked up at him. "And the hunger strikes? The lawsuits?" "Real," Ghost said. "That was the other side of the coin. Pain makes pressure. Pressure makes change. We learned to move both violence and reform like pieces on a board. That's the widow's web." Hall shifted his gaze to the two identical flash drives lying on the bench. "And now?" Ghost's expression didn't change. "Now it's about survival. There's a faction inside ready to burn the web, names, accounts, all of it, to save themselves. They've already put contracts on witnesses. They're inside your bureau, your prisons, your legislature. If I dump this data without a plan, everyone dies. If I give it to the wrong hands, same thing." He leaned closer. "You're the outsider who still believes in a line between right and wrong. That's why you're here. That's why he nodded at Sophia, is alive. Together you can choose which drive goes public, which stays dark. You can decide what survives." Sophia hugged her arms to her chest. "Or you could just give it all up and end this." Ghost gave a humorless smile. "End it? Pelican Bay isn't a place. It's a machine. Shut one door and it opens another. Burn one file and another surfaces. The only thing I can do is hand the fuse to someone who might not light it." The van slowed, turning onto a road lined with warehouses. The smell of diesel and salt air seeped in. Hall peered through the rain-streaked window and saw the glow of cranes at the North Bay Pier. They were close. Ghost looked at the drives, then at Hall. "When we stop," he said quietly, "you'll have to choose. One of those sticks contains everything. The other contains nothing but decoys. I won't tell you which is which. You decide what to plug in, who to trust, and who walks out alive." Hall's mouth was dry. "And if I choose wrong?" Ghost sat back. "Then the widow closes her legs. And everyone inside gets eaten." The van's tires hissed to a stop. Outside, waves broke against pilings, fog curling around the beams. A bell clanged faintly in the mist. The driver killed the engine. Ghost rose, tucking his hood back. "Welcome to the pier," he said. "Time to see who you really work for." Hall glanced at Sophia. She looked back at him, eyes wide. Rain beaded on the windows like tears. He reached for the flash drives. The pier. The rear doors of the van opened with a hiss of damp air and diesel fumes. Fog rolled in off the bay, swallowing the glow of sodium lamps and turning the cranes into hulking silhouettes. Waves slapped the pilings below, a slow, steady heartbeat under the drizzle. Marcus Hall stepped out first, flash drives in his pocket, jacket collar up against the rain. The wooden planks creaked under his boot. Sofia Alvarez followed, keeping close, her eyes darting to every shadow. Ghost climbed out last, hood back now, spiderweb tattoos glistening under the pier lights. He moved with the unhurried calm of someone who had already arranged every piece on the board. At the end of the pier, a warehouse loomed, its corrugated doors half open, a single yellow bulb burning inside. Through the gap, Hall could make out stacks of crates, a forklift, and the faint outline of a man in a bureau windbreaker. Another agent. Or another imposter. Ghost gestured toward the warehouse. "Inside," he said. "This is where the choice gets made." Hall kept his voice low. "You're not in charge here." Ghost's smile was faint. "I've never been in charge. I just built the lines. You're the one who decides whether to cut them." They walked down the pier. Water dripped from the underside in slow, rhythmic plinks. As they drew closer to the warehouse, the fog thinned enough for Hall to see more figures inside, 3, maybe 4, silhouettes around a laptop glowing on a crate. One of them turned and he recognized Agent Carter, the driver from earlier. Hall stopped. "Carter," he called. "Step out." Carter smiled a little too broadly. "You made it. Good." His hand twitched toward his radio, but he didn't speak into it. Sophia's fingers tightened on Hall's sleeve. "It's a trap," she whispered. Ghost leaned closer to Hall. "You've been inside their house this whole time," he murmured. "You still think you're running the operation?" Hall's heart thudded. The 2 flash drives felt like stones in his pocket, one full of evidence, one empty. Whoever these men were inside the warehouse, they wanted both him and Ghost in one place. He straightened. "Stay behind me," he told Sophia, then raised his voice. "Nobody moves until I see credentials." The man at the laptop chuckled and held up a bureau badge. "Credentials," he said. "Happy?" Hall's stomach turned. The badge was real. Ghost whispered, "They're not here for me. They're here for the drive." Hall stepped onto the warehouse floor. The air smelled of oil and damp cardboard. Carter closed the door behind him. The echo of the lock clicking shut was louder than the waves outside. The man with the laptop pointed at Hall's pocket. "Hand it over," he said. "You're out of your lane, Agent Hall." Hall glanced at Ghost. Ghost shrugged as if to say, "This is the web. This is what you built." Hall took a slow step forward. "Which one do you want?" he asked. He pulled out both flash drives and held them up. 2 identical black sticks glistening under the warehouse light. The men inside shifted, eyes flicking between them. Carter's smile faltered. "You don't know which is which," Hall said quietly. "And if I give you the wrong one, the dump goes live. You built your whole operation on Ghost. Now you're guessing." He took another step. "Let her go," he nodded at Sophia. "Then maybe you get a drive." The man with the laptop gave a small hand signal. One of the others moved toward Sophia. Hall's free hand tightened near his weapon. Ghost watched, calm, eyes glinting. The rain on the roof sounded like 1,000 footsteps. For the first time, Marcus Hall realized he wasn't just standing between 2 sides. He was standing in the middle of a storm he had unleashed. He closed his fist around both drives. The brake. Rain drummed on the warehouse roof like 1,000 fists. The yellow bulb overhead buzzed, casting jittery shadows on the crate. Marcus Hall stood in the center of the floor, both flash drives clenched in one fist, the other hand hovering near his weapon. Sofia Alvarez's back was pressed to a stack of pallets. Her wide eyes flicked between Hall and the men circling them. Ghost stood a few paces away, calm, hands loosely at his sides as though he were the only one not feeling the tension. Agent Carter took a slow step forward. "Hand them over, Marcus," he said. "We can fix this quietly." Hall's voice was low. "If I give you the wrong one, the entire widow's web goes public. Is that what you want?" The man at the laptop sneered. "We're not here for a philosophy lecture. You're out of your lane. Give me the drive." Hall's gaze swept the room. There were 4 men, all wearing bureau jackets but their stances wrong, shoulders forward, eyes hard, hands near concealed weapons. He saw no visible comms gear. He realized with a chill that these weren't a rogue cell inside the bureau, they were Ghost's enemies using bureau skins, or worse, a faction of the bureau playing its own game. Ghost broke the silence. "Marcus," he said softly, "remember what I told you in the tunnel. The fuse isn't a bomb. It's a leak. Pull the wrong thread and everybody burns." Carter's hand went to his belt. Last chance. Hall's mind raced. He had no idea which flash drive was real. He only knew that if they took Ghost, Sophia would die and the truth would be buried. He flicked his eyes toward Ghost. Ghost gave the faintest nod. Hall hurled one of the drives across the room. It skidded under a crate, clicking against metal. Instantly the men lunged for it. Hall grabbed Sophia's arm and shoved her behind him as he drew his weapon. Ghost moved at the same moment, striking Carter's wrist with a blur of motion. A gun clattered to the floor. Someone shouted. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Rain hammered the roof as shots cracked. Sparks flew from a stack of crates. Hall fired once into the ceiling to scatter them, then dove for the laptop. He yanked the power cord out. Screens went black. "Move!" he barked to Sophia. Ghost slammed another man into a pallet, disarming him with brutal efficiency. "The pier!" he shouted. "Go now!" Hall dragged Sophia toward the side door. A bullet snapped past, splintering wood. He shoved her through into the rain, then spun back just in time to see Ghost standing over the laptop, the real flash drive in his hand. "Go!" Ghost shouted. "This is what you wanted." Hall hesitated. "What about you?" Ghost smiled, blood on his teeth. "I was never leaving." Another gunshot rang out. Ghost flinched but didn't fall. He jammed the flash drive into a small black box wired to the laptop, a transmitter of some kind, and hit a button. A low hum rose, then a green light blinked. "The widow's awake," he said. Hall lunged for him, but a crate toppled between them, scattering papers. "Ghost!" he shouted. Ghost looked at him one last time. "Run," he whispered. Hall grabbed Sophia and ran. Behind him the transmitter's hum grew louder, the green light pulsing faster. The air inside the warehouse thickened with static, as if the whole building were a radio about to broadcast. Outside, sirens wailed. Real Bureau agents this time, maybe another faction. Hall didn't know. They sprinted down the pier into the fog. Waves crashed below. The entire warehouse behind them glowed faintly green through the mist. Sophia gasped. What did he do? Hall didn't slow. He pulled the fuse. The leak. Rain whipped sideways across the pier, stinging Marcus Hall's face as he dragged Sophia toward the end of the wharf. Behind them the warehouse glowed green, a low electrical hum swelling until it vibrated through the planks under their feet. Waves slammed the pilings below like drums. The whole bay smelled of ozone and diesel. Sophia clutched his arm. What's happening in there? Hall glanced back. Through the fog he could just make out Ghost at the laptop, one hand raised as if conducting an orchestra. The transmitter's light pulsed faster and faster. He's pushing it out, Hall shouted over the wind. Every file, every name, every account. The widow's web just went public. A second later the hum cut off and the warehouse went dark. Then Hall's phone vibrated. He yanked it out. Even without service, notifications were scrolling across the screen, encrypted messages, dump links, PDF files. It's everywhere, he muttered. He dumped the whole thing. From the far end of the pier came the screech of tires. Two black SUVs skidded to a stop, doors flying open. Real Bureau agents this time, weapons drawn. Hall raised his badge. Hold your fire, he shouted. We've got a protected witness. Sophia ducked behind him. Marcus, they'll think you're part of it, she whispered. He handed her the flash drive he still had. This is the decoy, he said. Keep it hidden. No matter what happens. The agents closed in, shouting orders. On your knees. Hands on your head. Red and blue lights strobed across the fog. Hall slowly lowered himself, palms up. "Agent Marcus Hall," he said loudly. "FBI Sacramento. Witness Sofia Alvarez in my custody. I need immediate extraction." One of the agents peered closer. "We've got orders to detain you, sir. You're named in the dump." Hall's stomach dropped. Ghost's leak had named him too, every contact, every call, every operation he'd run. Taken out of context, it would look like complicity. He felt the weight of the decoy drive missing from his pocket. Sofia had it now, hidden under her jacket. "Let me get her out," he said quietly. Before anyone could answer, a deep boom rolled from the warehouse. A section of the roof blew upward, not an explosion but a release like a vented pressure tank. A column of steam and paper scraps shot into the night sky. Dozens of envelopes fluttered out over the pier like snow. One landed at Hall's feet. He picked it up, legal mail with a spiderweb logo stamped in red. Through the fog he saw a figure limping out of the warehouse, Ghost. His hood was down, tattoos glistening, smoke curling from his clothes. He staggered to the edge of the pier and looked back once at Hall. Hall started forward, but the agents grabbed his arms. "Stay down," one barked. Ghost raised a hand in a small wave, then dropped something into the water. Maybe the real drive, maybe nothing at all. A splash, a ripple. Then he stepped off the pier and disappeared into the bay. "Ghost!" Hall shouted, straining against the agent's grip. But there was only fog and dark water. Sofia clutched his sleeve. "He's gone," she whispered. Helicopters thudded overhead. Floodlights swept the pier. The bureau agents tightened their circle. One reached for Sofia. "She comes with us," he said. Hall took a breath. He knew he had one card left, the decoy drive in her jacket. The real one, if it even still existed, was somewhere at the bottom of the bay with Ghost. Or maybe Ghost had planned for this all along. He raised his voice over the rotor wash. "I'll go with you," he said. "But she gets protection until a federal judge hears her testimony." The agent hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. Both of you. Now." As they were led toward a waiting helicopter, Hall looked back at the dark water. The fog was closing in again, erasing the warehouse, the pier, and the spiderweb of envelopes swirling across the bay. But in the vents under Pelican Bay, in the encrypted files spreading across the internet, the widow's web was alive and moving. He realized Ghost hadn't escaped or drowned. He had simply changed shape. Fallout. The helicopter cut through the low clouds, banking south toward Sacramento. Marcus Hall sat shackled to his seat, wind whipping through a cracked window. Sofia Alvarez was across from him, wrapped in a gray blanket, her eyes hollow from exhaustion. Below them, the coastline flickered with emergency lights. Every news truck in California seemed to be heading for Pelican Bay. Hall stared at the flash drive in Sofia's lap, the decoy he'd given her. If Ghost had played his final card right, the real drive was already in the public's hands, flooding servers with data. His phone buzzed weakly even without reception. Push alerts from every major outlet were already screaming across the screen. Massive prison gang leak implicates guards, lawyers, politicians. Operation Black Widow files released online. Pelican Bay inmates allegedly directed violence statewide. Sofia shifted under the blanket. "They're going to paint me as part of it," she murmured. "I testified about the hunger strikes. Now my name's in their dump too." Hall leaned forward as far as the cuffs would let him. "They'll paint both of us. That's why we need to get to a judge before they disappear us into some black site." Across the cabin, an agent watched them impassively, one hand on his radio. Hall caught the flash of a spiderweb sticker on the agent's clipboard. His stomach turned. The web wasn't just leaking, it was inside the extraction team. The helicopter touched down on the roof of a federal building in downtown Sacramento. Rain-slicked floodlights glared off the tarmac. As the door slid open, A knot of officials in suits waited under umbrellas. Cameras flashed from a nearby rooftop. Hall was hustled down a stairwell into a concrete corridor that smelled of bleach and coffee. They placed him in a small interview room with a metal table and a humming fluorescent light. His cuffs were removed. A man in a dark suit sat opposite him and slid a thick folder across the table. "Agent Hall," the man said calmly, "you've been named in a leak of classified and criminal data implicating dozens of state and federal employees. Before this goes to the Attorney General, we'd like to hear your explanation." Hall stared at the folder. "You think I built the widow's web?" The man's expression didn't change. "We think you and your source orchestrated the dump to cover a double cross. We think you've been running a false flag operation for years." Hall exhaled. He could almost hear Ghost's voice. "You've been our delivery system." Now, in this small room, it was a noose tightening around his neck. He opened his hands. "I tried to stop it," he said quietly. "I cut the wire. But you've been inside all along. How do I know you're not part of it?" The man leaned back, folding his hands. "Tell us where the real drive is." Hall gave a small, humorless laugh. "You're asking the wrong question," he said. "Ask where Ghost is." The man's eyes flickered for the first time. In another room down the hall, Sophia was being fingerprinted by two agents. She glanced at the decoy flash drive hidden in her pocket. Her phone vibrated once, a blocked number. She pressed it to her ear. A single voice spoke softly on the other end. "Stay alive, Sophia. The widow isn't done." Click. The line went dead. Back in the interview room, Hall's phone buzzed on the table though no one had given it power. He looked down. A single new message glowed across the cracked screen. Short, long. The pipes in Pelican Bay weren't the only ones speaking now. The code had gone digital. Hall looked up at the man in the dark suit. "It's already out there," he said. "You can't stop it." The man closed the folder slowly. "Then maybe we stop you." Hall leaned back, a faint, grim smile on his face. "You can try." The web remains. Rain hammered Sacramento all night, but by morning the city was slick and bright under a weak sun. News helicopters circled the federal building like vultures. On the street below, protesters gathered with signs reading "End Solitary Now" and "Expose the Web." Reporters shouted into cameras about the Pelican Bay leak, a flood of documents naming guards, lawyers, politicians, and contractors who had profited from California's prison gangs. Inside a secure courtroom, Marcus Hall sat at the defense table beside his appointed counsel. Shackles were gone, but the weight of 1,000 eyes pressed on him from the gallery. Sofia Alvarez sat a few rows back, flanked by marshals. She looked steadier now, but her fingers still worried the hidden decoy flash drive like a talisman. At the front of the room, the U.S. attorney read out a list of emergency indictments. Some of the names made Hall's stomach lurch. Men he'd worked with, even trusted. Every few minutes a phone buzzed somewhere in the room as another tranche of Ghost's data surfaced online. It was impossible to tell where the leak ended and the news began. When Hall's name was called, he rose slowly. "Agent Hall," the judge said, peering over glasses. "Do you have anything to say before this panel considers your suspension and possible indictment?" Hall looked out over the crowd. He saw reporters scribbling, cameras ready, and in the farthest corner of the room, a man in a dark hoodie, head bowed. For a moment he thought it was Ghost, but when the man raised his face it was someone he didn't recognize. A spiderweb tattoo peeked from his collar. Hall drew a breath. "What you're seeing today isn't a leak," he said clearly. "It's a mirror. Pelican Bay isn't an anomaly. It's a system we built. We used solitary confinement, hunger, fear, and gangs as tools. And in the end those tools were turned back on us." The courtroom buzzed. The judge rapped the gavel but let him continue. "I chased Ghost to shut down a network. Instead I found a network using me to shut down its rivals. We created the conditions. We gave it the channels. We thought we could control it from the outside. We were wrong." He glanced at Sophia. "There are witnesses who tried to tell the truth and were silenced. Protect them. If you want to end the widow's web, start by ending the walls that built it." The judge signaled the marshals, but the damage was done. Reporters rushed for the doors to beam the speech out live. On social media, the clip spread instantly, spliced with leaked documents and grainy Pelican Bay footage. The widow's web was no longer hidden, it was trending. That night, Hall sat alone in a holding cell, listening to the distant hum of HVAC pipe. Through the narrow window, he could see the city skyline, lights twinkling like nodes on a network. His phone, miraculously returned to him for cooperation, buzzed once. No number. A text glowed on the cracked screen. "The web survives. Thank you for cutting it open." Below it, a GPS pin appeared. Crescent City. Pelican Bay. Hall stared at it. Somewhere in the SHU, Ghost was either dead or alive, free or caged. It didn't matter. The widow's web no longer needed him. It had already slipped beyond walls, beyond cells, into cables and screens. He typed back one word: "Why?" 3 dots appeared, then vanished. No reply came. Sofia Alvarez walked out of the courthouse into a crush of cameras. She clutched the decoy drive in her coat pocket and, for the first time, thought about plugging it into a laptop. Even if it held nothing, the symbolism would be enough. People were finally listening. Above her, news helicopters roared like thunder. In their downwash, a single scrap of paper fluttered up from the sidewalk, a piece of legal mail stamped with a red spiderweb. She caught it before it blew away. On the northern coast, the fog rolled back over Pelican Bay. Through a cracked vent in the SHU, a faint tapping started, short, long. Inmates passed the message cell to cell, pipe to pipe. Not a countdown this time, but a question. Who's listening now? The sound traveled through concrete and steel, out into the cables, into the servers carrying Ghost's leak. For the first time, the web had no center, only signals, scattered and alive. Back in his cell, Marcus Hall lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, the echo of the tap in his head. He didn't know if he was a prisoner, a whistleblower, or something in between. He only knew the story wasn't over. Outside, the Pacific crashed against the rocks, and Pelican Bay stood like a fortress in the mist. But in the pipes beneath it, a new rhythm had begun.